Welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are taking a look at the next category in my category breakdown series, and in this video we are taking a look at the best original screenplay. And if you're new to the channel or new to this series, I have created a playlist with all of the other previous episodes in this series. But basically, all this is just every video we're taking a look at a different category at the Oscars, and then we're taking a look at all of the nominees in that category. So what we do is we take each film, talk about those that are nominated with the film, talk about some facts about the nominations, and then the nomination itself in general. And then at the end, I will give you my personal ranking of each of the nominees, and then my prediction for how likely it is that I think they win the Academy Award on March 2nd. So without further ado, let's take a look at the nominees. The first nominee is Anora. Written by Sean Baker. This is Sean Baker's fourth Oscar nomination. All four of his nominations have come this year for writing, directing, producing, and editing Anora. Just last night, Anora won for Best Original Screenplay at the Writers Guild Awards. Anora was nominated for Best Original Screenplay at the BAFTAs, Critics' Choice Awards, and the Golden Globes. Now, when you think about what makes Anora as a film just work, I think the easiest and one of the quickest things to point to of why the film works as well as it does is this screenplay. Solely for the idea of, if you've seen Anora, you know that there is kind of two different things that are happening here. We start off with kind of this personal, kind of more love story, this romantic, this Cinderella-esque story of the first half. And so the writing there is done in this way that is kind of, you're falling in love with these characters and you're so kind of hopeful for, again, just for the characters and as the film's going on. And then you get to the second half of this story, and the second half just takes a whole different angle, a whole different direction of, I'm not going to talk about kind of like what exactly happens, because I want you to, see the film as blind as possible, but something kind of happens around that halfway mark. Something, in the script, something that they wrote in there and decided that we're going to put this in here, which is going to then just change the direction of where this story is going. And not only does it change the direction that the story is going, but it changes our characters. Some of the characters are all of a sudden now kind of in bigger roles. We're introducing a whole bunch of new characters kind of in the second half of the film. But then the biggest thing is our main character. It's Annie, Mike Madison's character. She goes through, I don't want to say this whole kind of transformation, like she's not a different person, she's the same person, but we're now seeing kind of a different side. Obviously you saw kind of the Cinderella-esque nature in the first half, but now all of a sudden you're seeing someone that is stressed and is on edge and is confused, and all of a sudden, it's this whole kind of whirlwind that she's going through in the second half of this film. And so I think that the screenplay does an excellent job of like building this character, and you're experiencing this character for the first half of the film, and then all of a sudden, in the second half, we're now getting a more well-rounded picture of this character. We're getting a better idea of kind of a little bit more of just kind of, touching up on the edges of this character and getting a full bigger picture of who they are. And then once we get to the end of the film, you get such this big kind of humanity about them, and you get this very emotional and touching moment with our character that kind of shows this kind of complete journey that she was able to go through a script that, again, is just kind of two different halves or two different sides of one big long story. And so I think for me that is the beautiful thing about Anora, the film. The reason it works so well is, I mean, it's easy to just say that it's Sean Baker because, it's his story, but because, again, he wrote, direct, produced, edited, all the things they're working, it's all because it's coming from one singular vision from Sean Baker. And so that's why I totally think that, if Sean Baker works for you as a director, or if Anora is working for you as a film, it's easy to kind of see how the tide is maybe turning with this film as we're approaching to the Oscars, where suddenly, 99% of the way through the Critics' Choice Awards, we kind of around there we were thinking, oh, maybe Anora's dead, maybe this isn't happening, maybe this isn't a thing. And then from that point on, it has been sweeping, it's been winning everything, and it's this big turnaround to where I think at the Oscars it has a great shot at winning so many different awards. And it's because if you love the film and you love that vision that Sean Baker has, it's because of how he wrote it, it's how he directed, how he, edited the film. Everything is just kind of coming together through one singular vision. And I do think that singular vision for how Sean Baker was able to put this together, I do think started with that screenplay. So for my personal ranking, I'm putting Anora in second, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in first. The next nominee is The Brutalist. Written by Brady Corbet and Mona Fastfold, this is Brady Corbet's third Oscar nomination. All of his nominations have come this year for writing, directing, and producing The Brutalist. This is Mona Fastfold's first Oscar nomination. The Brutalist won for Best Original Screenplay at the Golden Globes and was nominated at both the BAFTAs and the Critics' Choice Awards. And like I just said with Anora, where I think that the screenplay is maybe like the thing you single out and when you focus on with Anora, I do think that the screenplay is great in The Brutalist, but I think that the film kind of transcends a little bit more than just the screenplay of it, and to more so like just so much of kind of like the technical aspects and like the acting. I think is maybe some of the initial highlights that you think of the film, which obviously the acting is great because of the screenplay. Like it's a thing that goes hand in hand. But I do think that just initially when you think of The Brutalist, the first things you think of is the cinematography, the production design, the score, I mean honestly even kind of the editing, some of the editing choices they make, and then of course the acting performances, and then even the direction. And so it's one of those things that I think the screenplay that initially kind of started out as our front runner and maybe what we all were kind of defaulting to as maybe the favorite in this category, it has kind of been slipping a little bit in terms of the likelihood that I think it'll win, and the way that it hasn't exactly been winning a lot. I mean, since the Globe, it just hasn't really kind of been in contention in a couple of the categories. So I do think that this is a category where The Brutalist has maybe kind of fallen out of contention a little bit. I'm not going to say it's completely out because it's still, you know, one of the three best picture films here in this category. It's of the three, I guess, Anora, but it's like the number two most likely to win Best Picture, I would say still. And so I do think that as long as it's in that race, it still has a shot here. But then just talking about the actual screenplay of The Brutalist and what makes it work so well is, I think this is one of those where it's almost the sheer volume of the script, I think, is a big thing here. Obviously, we've got this is the longest film at the Oscars this year, 3 hours and 40 minutes, and so there is just so much to the story. There is so much that is beautifully done just in that script in terms of just, I mean, getting the story like on paper and then to the screen. There is just so much to chew on, and there's so much to enjoy here. What I do think that the script does an excellent job as well, this kind of seems to be a theme where there's kind of two halves of these movies or different things that are happening, and that's kind of what this screenplay does really well as well is you get this first half where it's so full of optimism and it's so full of the a foreigner coming over and is an immigrant here in the country early, in the early days of the country, and is kind of experiencing America, is escaping from war and everything that's happening, tearing his family apart, in his home country. So he comes to America to live the American dream, and the whole first half is this kind of idyllic and just optimistic film of he's getting these opportunities. Sometimes maybe an opportunity doesn't quite work the way it does, but because of his perseverance and because of this, he's able to kind of continue to trek forward and continue to get more and more opportunities. And then the second half is kind of more of a grounded, or kind of a little bit more of a here's when things can go wrong, or here's maybe what the real American dream is like for immigrants, especially at this time in the country. And the film and the screenplay, because it kind of has those two tonal shifts, again, I'd say in the screenplay, it does kind of makes each story kind of feel like this full moment. And I do think that this is one of those that for the first half of The Brutalist, I do think that works better for a lot of people. They're kind of more bought into and understanding a little bit kind of the tone of the first half. And then the second half, because it's just not the same tone that the first half was, some people are just kind of thinking, oh well, I didn't like the second half as much. But the second half is so integral to the story and to the themes that Brady Corbet was trying to touch on with this screenplay. And so I do think it's just one of those things that from start to finish, with all of kind of the metaphors and the symbolism and the harsh truths and the just everything that happens in the second half of this screenplay, it's kind of the brutal and the upsetting and just kind of the tough reality of what the first half was setting up for an immigrant at this time in our country. And so I do think that there is just so much about the screenplay that from start to finish is fully realized, and I think it is to Brady Corbet's vision, the exact way that he wanted to tell it. And so I do think that there is something there that for a lot of people and for a lot of voters, there is something that they could latch onto with this screenplay. For my personal ranking, I'm putting The Brutalist in fourth, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in third. The next nominee is A Real Pain, written by Jesse Eisenberg. This is Jesse Eisenberg's second Oscar nomination. He was nominated for Best Actor in 2011 for The Social Network. A Real Pain was nominated for Best Original Screenplay at the BAFTAs, the Critics' Choice Awards, and the Golden Globes. Future David jumping in here, just letting you know that as I'm editing this video, I'm also watching the BAFTAs at the same time, and A Real Pain actually just won at the BAFTAs as well. So, I'm sure that maybe would, had I not already recorded this earlier, maybe would change my tune a little bit about where I stand on A Real Pain. Now, there's this one, A Real Pain, and the next film that we're going to talk about in this category. These are the two that I think, when you think about this film, and especially in kind of the grand terms of their overall Oscar, the big picture of like what it is at the Oscars, I think these are the two that you almost like exclusively view these as screenplay vehicles. The Brutalist, Anora, all the films we talked about yesterday in the adapted screenplay category. Those are all films that I think, there is so much to them, and maybe the screenplay is the standout or it's a big thing, but then it's still, there are so many other things that it's nominated. A Real Pain and the next film that we're going to talk about, these are just kind of more singularly focused to the screenplay. Granted, A Real Pain does have Kieran Culkin as well, who is like the front runner in his category, especially depending on what happens here at the BAFTAs in a couple minutes from when I'm recording this video. But I do think that a lot of what Kieran Culkin is doing, I do think maybe a little bit is him kind of outside the screenplay a little bit, because he is just kind of acting Kieran Culkin-y, he's acting like Roman in Succession, like that is just kind of the same energy that he's bringing. But I do think that character was specifically written that way in this screenplay. I think that Jesse Eisenberg wanted this kind of the line that really stood out to me when I was watching the when I was watching the film a second time, it's kind of the emotional moment toward the end of the film when they're having this heart to heart, Benji and David, and Jesse Eisenberg's character tells him that like you light up a room whenever you walk into the room, and then once you've kind of captivated the room and you've lit up this room, you immediately just take a shit on everything in there. And so I think that is kind of the energy that he wanted in this screenplay, and so he did an excellent job of getting Kieran Culkin to provide that energy of someone that just is captivating, but then is also just kind of tearing everything down, or has these outbursts, or has these moments that someone like David, who's a little bit more socially awkward as we see in the film, is just brutal for him to kind of have to, sit there and listen to Kieran Culkin as he's kind of chastising the tour guide, or he's, doing all these different things. And so I do think that the film does an excellent job of kind of the contrasting of the characters, the screenplay specifically, of giving us this one character that is so full of just kind of captivating the room and just wants to stand out and is kind of the main character, if you will, and then you've got David, Jesse Eisenberg's character, who is very much wants to just kind of fit in, wants to blend in. He used to. They talk about how he used to be kind of similar to Kieran Culkin's character, but then he's like Jesse Eisenberg's character says he grew up and then he got married, had kids. Like he just so much wanted to just kind of conform and just blend in and just move on and live his life and not live it as authentically and as out there as Benji's character, as Kieran Culkin does. And so I do think that that's the beauty of this screenplay, is it's this screenplay that gives you this great kind of drastic and this these two differing characters that kind of just that maybe started out similarly but have gone these different ways in their life, and then kind of getting this trip as an opportunity to kind of reconcile and to kind of come to terms with how they've kind of differed over the years. And then the screenplay also is just because it's kind of this, you may maybe think of it as this buddy comedy. You got these two characters on the road, but then there is such an emotional thing that they're doing. They are going on a Holocaust tour, and they are going to visit their grandma's house, and there's just, so much kind of emotion and heart that is packed into it. And so for the first half, there is still kind of some emotion, and there's still some impactful moments, but it is kind of a little bit more on the comedy side in the first half. When it gets to like the second half, when they like get to Auschwitz in that part of the tour, I think it's like their last day on the tour before they go to the grandma's house, when it kind of gets to that moment and it becomes such a somber and such a just very emotional piece, that's one of those things that I think just kind of caps off the screenplay for me entirely, of just doing an excellent job of giving these characters, giving you the drastic characteristics that they have, and then regardless of who the characters, I mean, because even outside of our two cousins, there are so many other characters, so many other people on this tour. Despite what any of those characters brought to that point of the script, once we get to this part, it becomes the emotional kind of cap on the film that I think just provides such an emotional punch and just really kind of beautifully ties the screenplay. I think just beautifully together, and the screenplay also does an excellent job of exploring the characters. I mean, because even post that, there's still some time toward the end of the film where we're still continuing to explore our main characters, and it kind of ends on this moment of the end of the film is maybe a little bit up for interpretation of whether what you think the story meant and what this meant for these characters, what this experience, how that's going to impact them and move them forward. And I just think that that's a beautiful and very kind of interesting angle for the screenplay to take. And so that's why I think A Real Pain is one of the better screenplays of the year, and it's why for a film that kind of was falling apart in so many other categories, including Best Picture, that's why Kieran Culkin and the screenplay were the two categories that it never faltered. In future, David, jumping in one more time, you're about to see that I'm going to put this where I'm going to put this. I think I'm putting A Real Pain above The Brutalist now in terms of my prediction. I think it's more. I think I'm giving a little bit more weight to the BAFTA win for Real Pain as I am for the Globe win for The Brutalist. So yeah, this is already, by the time I've even edited and uploaded this video, I think it's a little bit out of date. But I do think that A Real Pain not only has a little bit better of a chance than The Brutalist, I think this could potentially be some sort of 3 or 4 horse race going into Oscar night. This is one of the most exciting categories for me. For my personal ranking, I'm putting A Real Pain in 3rd, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in 4th. The next nominee is September 5. Written by Moritz Bender, Tim Fellbaum, co-written by Alex David. This is the first Oscar nomination for all 3 of Moritz Bender, Tim Fellbaum, and Alex David. September 5 was nominated for Best Original Screenplay at the Critics' Choice Awards. Now, while September 5 is based on true events, it is an original screenplay, kind of the idea of how they were able to cover this story, and what they did is something that I think you do have to kind of give credit to the screenplay for kind of deciding to take this angle. Even if it's maybe not exactly what I think a lot of people would have done, but the angle that they take in this is because it's this real life tragic event that happened, at the Olympics, and instead of kind of telling a story that is outside and is covering the actual events and is covering the hostage situation and is covering kind of the wider impact of what it is having outside of this one building, what the screenplay does is they decide to tell this through the eyes and through the ABC sports team that was covering the Olympics, and now all of a sudden they're covering this hostage situation, and so it really becomes this kind of newsroom drama. And so I do think that is a creative idea for how the screenplay was conceived, and it's one of those things that you can see how, if this film works for you, the screenplay is probably one of the big things that does work for you. But I do know that there's a lot of people that would have preferred this to be maybe a little bit bigger of a story and maybe more so focused on the real events and what's actually happening outside and the actual moment, as opposed to just the news coverage of it. So I do think that is something that kind of works for some people, kind of doesn't. Once they made this decision with the screenplay, I think the things that do kind of work with the film for me, and the reason that it kind of is this kind of interesting kind of little bottle thriller and suspense story, I think the part of that works is, again, a little bit due to the screenplay, but I think a lot of it is kind of the editing and the way that some of the scenes are just kind of edited, and the cinematography is pretty good in this as well, kind of giving you this bottled feeling of you're in this one specific newsroom, but also this bottled feeling because we're just getting these close shots, like these close-ups on characters' faces, and even when we're in the room, it's never like this wide shot where you're getting a whole look at the entire room. You're always kind of focused on 1 or 2 characters maximum at any time on the screen, and so there's a lot of those things that I think, in collaboration with the screenplay, are what kind of create that bottled and tense feeling. And so I do think that there are some things here with the screenplay with September 5 that do create this unique and interesting experience. But ultimately, I do think that it is the screenplay here that, I think it was pretty obvious that, the other four films in this category were the locks of the category. When it came to the nomination, this was always pretty obviously and pretty clearly kind of the fifth place, like just getting into the category. And, again, with September 5 not really being able to materialize in any other category, this was one of those that you could tell it kind of got in here, and this was kind of reaching the potential of what this film could be. And again, it's one of those that I think that the film, for the people that it does work for, I think a big part of it is that screenplay, but I don't necessarily know if it was necessarily my favorite aspect of the film. So for my personal ranking, I'm putting September 5 in 5th, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in 5th. And the final nominee is The Substance. Written by Coralie Farjah. This is Coralie Farjah's third Oscar nomination. All three of her nominations came this year for writing, directing, and producing The Substance. The Substance won for Best Original Screenplay at the Critics' Choice Awards and was nominated at the BAFTA and the Golden Globes. Now, I think this is no surprise when we get to The Substance. You know where this is going to be in my personal ranking and my predictions. This is one of those that, obviously, if you've seen any of the videos on my channel, you know, especially in this category breakdown series, you know that the Substance is my favorite of the Best Picture films. You know that it is the one that, that I'm rooting for, and it's the one that, it's just kind of in all of its nominations, it's kind of my favorite in each of those categories. Now, if I had to rank like my favorite of, if I just had to rank The Substance's 5 nominations from my favorite of its nominations to my least favorite, this is probably my favorite. I mean, this and Hair and Makeup, but this is probably my favorite of its nominations, because what makes The Substance work is the wholly original and the completely just singular, just this crazy idea of a story. This whole screenplay is so far out there. It is taking this idea of kind of these feminist themes, and in terms of taking a look at, the beauty standards, especially for older women in Hollywood. I mean, just older women in general. And I don't even necessarily mean to just say older, like older is in age of 50, which is what Demi Moore is turning in this film, and all of a sudden acting like this, the beauty standards of what Dennis Quaid's character says in the beginning of the film is once you turn 50, it just stops. And then he can't really explain what it is or why it stops. But just when you get to this age that, still full of so much life to live, Demi Moore is not this old and decrepit character. And that's kind of the part of a lot of people talk about as just how beautiful and how attractive Demi Moore is still at the beginning of the film. But because of just the beauty standards, and because of the nature of the way that the idea of what beauty is, and you can't be beautiful at 50, it takes this whole kind of idea that could have been this real kind of empowering and kind of this feminist theme, this feminist story, and then all of a sudden it turns it and makes it this ugly and destructive body horror film as the second half goes on, which is something that, like, when I was watching this film, I mean, again, it's not necessarily all that subtly well done. It's not supposed to kind of be, you get to the end and you realized, oh, this was a whole metaphor about, beauty standards. Like, it very clearly is showing you that this is what it is, and it is so out there, and it is so crazy. And so the whole film, the whole entire movie, I was just having a blast with kind of the themes and what we're kind of talking about here, but then just turning that up to 11, the absurd nature and the way that we are delivering this story, I think was just so well realized by Coralie Farjah. She had this idea for this story, and if you've seen, after this, I went back and watched her previous film, Revenge. You can see that is kind of, I think, an area and an idea, or kind of the theme, or the genre that she likes to tackle is kind of these horror films and kind of these revenge slash kind of empowering women in horror. And so I do think that this is the kind of the genre that she likes to stay in. And so when she had this bigger idea of kind of this bigger topic of this is what I want to tackle, but how do I turn that into a body horror, type of film, I think it's just an insane thing that should not have worked as well as it did, and then it did. And because of the film being so original and so unique to just kind of what it is, that's what made that screenplay just so powerful for me. That's what made the screenplay so insane. And just the thing that you get to the end of the year and you look back at your favorite films, and there's a film on there with this insane just so far out there. Like, it is so hard to explain the way that this film goes toward the end of the film without spoiling it for those that haven't seen it. But when you get to the end of this film and you look back and you say, how did we get there? And it really is just from Coralie Farjah's mind, the way that she was able to envision. I think maybe kind of that was where she had the story going, and that was what she wanted the kind of the final moments of this film to be, and then kind of tacking on this story that led you kind of to that moment. It's just so well done. The screenplay is just by far, it's, again, with the hair and makeup being the other thing that I think works so well for this film, those being the two things that really were propelling this film to the Oscars and to this moment. And then, with all of the additional nominations that came along with it, I think that's just a testament to how strong this screenplay is. So for my personal ranking, I'm putting this in first, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in second. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching the video. Let me know down below in the comments what you think of these nominees and what you're rooting for in this category. Also, let me know if there was any films that you think were maybe snubbed in this category that you would have liked to see get in here. And if you'd like to like this video and then subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos in the category breakdown series, I would greatly appreciate it. And have a great day.